which is I'm delighted now to have Dianne Lee, the DLRC, moderate us through some of the challenges around how you address scaling. You know, do you, as the title said, do you borrow it? By outsourcing, do you buy it because it's just there on the shelf and you take it, and you throw it together and it works? Or do you grow your own? Over to the panel.
Thanks very much, Tony. Morning, everybody. So yes, we're going to be talking about why scalability is a challenging goal, and all about getting the timing right, getting the process right, keeping your stakeholders fully on board, because this isn't easy. So how a business leader is going to make the right decisions. If you want to know more about any of us on the panel, then our biogs, I think, are in the app. But we'll just go across the table and introduce ourselves. So as Tony said, I'm Dianne Lee. I'm CEO of DLRC, which is a regulatory consulting company.
Morning, everyone. Morning, everyone. I'm Fran Crawford. I'm CEO and co-founder of Vianautis Bio, formerly called Somerset.
Neil Torbett, CEO of Phoremost.
Rob Grundy, CEO of Intelligent OMICS.
Alexander Henzing, Head of Business Development at the Medicines Discovery Catapult.
Dan Rooke, co-founder and COO at Codon.
Thank you. So I think to start with, we just go back across the panel again. Can you just share one factor that you feel is key to successful scaling? Do you want to go first, Fran? Or should we could go from the other end, actually. Dan, why don't you start?
So I think for us, we're a big believer. I mean, money always goes far, right? But I think for us, we're a big believer in people. I think people build businesses. You can have a load of cash and you can run it up a wall if you don't have the right people to make the right strategies and to implement it. So I think for us, a focus on bringing the right people in at all levels, from top down, is absolutely crucial to that.
Alexander?
Mine is very similar, actually, and it's more like around culture. So culture within the organization and culture of the partners that you seek. So you have a good fit and you know you can work together and trust each other to build the team and grow.
Well, given that you guys have stolen my first two, I'm going to provide a segue from the last session and say cash. I mean, in order to, you can grow without serious investment, but I think to scale in a meaningful way, you definitely need investment.
Neil?
For me, I would say no one size fits all. I'm sure that's going to come through the discussion today. So scale really to meet your organisational needs. Maybe we'll have a more expanded discussion on that, but at Phoremost, at least, we've been through, I would say, several evolutions of our company, starting from a target ID, phenotypic screening-based enterprise, where we had a very core capability that we needed. As we've grown, we've moved into drug discovery, and that's presented all kinds of other scaling needs and challenges. But really being able to adapt and respond to what your particular organisation needs. And so for some companies, it could be a complete outsourcing model. Others, it could be more of a hybrid or internal-focused organisation.
So for us at Vianautis, I think that scaling our science is what we're at the heart of doing, and coming along with that is growing the teams that are able to assist in that process. But the teams can mean either the teams that we have inside, and I agree with all the comments, and sorry to be boring on this, that have been made, but I think as well bringing in appropriate outside support and outsourcing. And further than that, actually, as a generality, not particularly within my current organisation, I'm a great believer in building companies through M&A to really be able to bring what you need in order to make a very coherent output of your science.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks. I think I would agree with all of those points, all really important areas that we want to look at when we're growing different companies. And I think for our company, we've got to the stage now where we've brought in so much, things like IT, HR support, which were all outsourced, and that has a huge impact on your profitability, and then you have to go to the next stage, and that's always is the cash going to run out? So yes. Okay, so I think the next point that we discussed previously, Rob, is outsourcing always the more capital efficient option?
I think it depends on a number of factors. First of all, obviously, what is it that you're looking to outsource? What function are you looking to outsource? How core is it to the objectives that you're looking to achieve within the business, for a start? Then you start to think about, what size of investment do you need to achieve that objective, or execute that function? How long are you going to be doing it? How large a project it is? If those things aren't too significant, then I think the economics of outsourcing become pretty appealing, actually. If it is core to what you do and it's existential in terms of your ability to do it, then perhaps it's a different question. But I think in the UK particularly, today we're blessed with a very rich ecosystem of provision right across the drug discovery and development spectrum. And I think if you're the type of company that's focused on a small number of assets and you're not looking to become a significantly sized biotech, then it's very hard not to see outsourcing of a majority of functions as the most capital efficient way forward.
Okay. Anyone else want to come in on that? No? Okay. So the next question that I wanted to pose was to you, Fran. Who do you involve in prioritising what must be inside the company and what can go external?
Yes, well, of course, this is quite a wide question, and I can take it from the perspective of Vianautis, which is a growing but still fairly early stage company, as has been pre-trailed already this morning. We have recently completed a 20 million Series A funding, and this has put us in the position, as I said in my opening remarks, that we need to be able to grow our science, and all our efforts are pushed towards doing that. So what do we need to do? We need to absolutely outsource, but the outsourcing is pretty technical in the terms of how can we generate more data. There's also a lot of other outsourcing, the sorts of things that you've just mentioned, Dianne, like HR and IT, and those are, as far as we're concerned, a no-brainer. We're never going to become experts in those areas. As far as the technical outsourcing is concerned, it's a balance between, are we going to be thinking about bringing this in-house eventually, in which case it is training our teams internally with skills that eventually could come to us, or the balance of that is the speed with which we can generate data. So ideally, we would want to get both of those things going along. So the people to involve, first of all, starting with our senior team, which elements of our project plans do we need to address in what time frame? We then need to bring it to our senior scientists, who within their team do they think have skills that are appropriate in this area, because they may not be able to do it themselves, but they need to be able to instruct the external people in how our technology works and how we get the best data out of it. So I think that those are very important stakeholders in that process. But the probably equal importance, having a whole set of new investors on board who are following what we're doing with a fair amount of interest, we need to involve them in the major decisions, the smaller ones, perhaps what you might call the HRs, the ITs. But in terms of the scientific goals, we at least need to flag that this is our plan forward. So I hope that gives a flavour of how we're thinking about it, but it's a very active process for us at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's
Dan?
stage specific, though, isn't it, in the sense of, I think you find, particularly in the early days, the companies that we look at, the only route is to outsource in many ways because, the CROs have the equipment, they've got the infrastructure, you may have a limited amount of cash, and I think that analysis, as Franz just explained, changes as you evolve, as you get older. So I would say I think it's very stage specific, strategy specific. It depends, what you need. But I think if you're in the early days, actually, that you will find that outsourcing is perhaps for a variety of reasons, either because you're an investor like we are, and we want a certain degree of saying, right, okay, has this been validated externally? Have you done the work? Have you had all, is the data? Can we rely on the person doing the work? So there's a huge amount of, I think, stage specific things that are relevant to that decision-making process, and I think that will change as you go through the process and grow.
I think it is important to think about the skills that you want to build. So in our case, we have a choice between thinking about building up in vivo models internally or to put them out. And there is so much regulation around in vivo that it would take us probably a year and a half or more before we could even put anything into a mouse. So it is a no-brainer to do that. But it has the downside that the turnaround times are not great. The CROs, no names mentioned, want long times for contracting. And then there's finding the slot within their other slots. And then eventually, you don't have your hands on the data. You do eventually, but you want to sort of see it being generated in real time. So ideally, we would like to do in vivo in-house, but it's not really an option. So you have to kind of weigh these things up.
Yeah. I think maybe we'll go to the question, Alexander, for you, because can it be a journey whereby outsourcing provides a means of upskilling or recruiting the in-house team in the longer term? So I think that's the building on this.
It comes back to that culture piece in the sense to find the right partners. So as Fran says, it's like you might not be able to do it all in-house, and therefore, but you want maybe eventually is finding the right partners that you can work with, you can trust, and therefore by working together, you can upskill your own team whilst making sure that they do the work that you want to do. Because it's that kind of thing to say, actually, if you can have that's almost like one team working together to one goal, will mean that like you get the data you need faster. You learn along the way, you upskill your own team to the point that at some point you might say, actually, now I can bring it in-house and recruit my own staff, or indeed just starting that work with your partners, knowing that eventually you will build up your team so you can do it in-house, because just recruitment itself will take long enough, and then actually getting that right team and the equipment, etc., might be an investment that you're not willing to make at this moment. So actually finding those right partners to help you on that journey can be really efficient, but bearing in mind that some things you might always want to outsource and others you might eventually want to bring in-house because it's too important for your own pipeline.
I think when we were discussing this before, I think we were really talking a lot about cultural fit with organisations, and how important it is that when you are that outsourced partner that you can adapt in order to provide the right sort of work for whoever you're working for, so that they feel that you're part of the team and that you really go forward in a partnership rather than just providing a service, that it really is a marriage of the two entities to have the best.
And I think that's important from both sides. I mean, our business is in the provision of AI technologies for target identification. So that requires us to understand very clearly what the ambitions are of our partner and work with them to achieve those, and communicate clearly. But I think Xander's point about your ambitions as a procurer of services, if you're clear that you have a timeline that involves outsourcing in the first instance, but ultimately to develop the skills internally. It's important to communicate that to the service provider as well, because they have a business to run and they have projections to forecast, and they're not going to resent you for wanting to bring their function in-house. In fact, they'll help you achieve it, right?
Yes, exactly.
But if you ambush them with the news that you're no longer going to be working with them, that creates a kind of a tension that doesn't benefit the work as a whole.
Yeah,
And I guess
very
also,
much agree. Yeah.
also comes back to the sense of what is your organisation's point of difference? What are you really needing to have internal versus what can you carefully choose to utilise other people's expertise? I guess taking a couple of examples, in our case, we're based in Cambridge. Our platform uses flow cytometry quite routinely, and we use the Abraham's flow expertise, and they're world renowned. They have an amazing facility, and that's something that we clearly chose not to replicate. One, because of the capital outlays that would needed to happen to buy our own flow cytometers that become out of date very quickly, but also using their carefully developed expertise in house. So that's just one example for us.
And another example we have, we provide regulatory affairs support, but we don't do pharmacovigilance, and for many reasons. But so we use a pharmacovigilance provider to provide that, even though it's quite closely aligned with regulatory affairs. It's not our core expertise. So, yeah.
I think you'll find as well that it's not. I think we're making an obvious assumption of one type of business, but it's not just stage specific, it's business specific as well, right? Because what you might require to outsource if you are a medtech company versus what you might require to outsource if you're a therapeutics company, completely different requirements, and how you will build that entity, whether you will buy, borrow, or grow your own, will be totally different strategy-wise for digital health medtech business than it will be for a therapeutics business, right? Because your capital outlay requirements are completely different. Your staffing requirements, how you insource it may be completely different. So again, it's not just stage; it's also business specific as well.
Yeah, and I think as well, we're very focused on this early stages I've been describing. But I mean, as we go on, and you have to also have an eye to the future, that there's big things like manufacturing, regulatory, and unless you're going to have a big regulatory affairs department, it's almost always a good idea when you're small to outsource that. I'm sure that's
Yes.
music to your ears. But manufacturing is something that is also. I'm a strong believer in. If you're going to be a manufacturer, be a manufacturer. But if you need something manufacturing, get the experts to do it. Unless you're going for a specialty pharma model, which is very big, very ambitious, and I would say that outsourcing manufacturing is always something that should be considered.
I think the whole big is better thing is an interesting debate that sometimes finds tension in areas like clinical research. Like most everyone's going to outsource clinical research, because to start clinical research capability within your own organisation is a pretty kind of brave thing to do. But when you're selecting a clinical research provider, there's always that tension between, the big guys, the proven track record, but are you, as a small biotech, trying to run a lean organisation, going to be pecking second to GSK, who are providing a steady stream of business? And so I think there's a task there to manage and do your research in terms of the provision, because take advantage of the fact that there are a spectrum of different organisations providing that, and check out the small guys, because you can get a lot of attention from those guys if you do the diligence on their capability that isn't perhaps quite as obvious as one of the larger players might be.
And it comes back to that culture in a sense, because you might get one provider, but they can help you along the way and then pass you on to one of their other partners who can then fit really well with you, and actually you can move along the scale, like in terms of manufacturing, that kind of thing. You might not want to do that at first, but actually getting a provider that helps you along the way to build the scale, and then you do get the funding, you might want to then set up your own manufacturing, but you've de-risked a lot of it for yourself, and you might get that capital then to set it up yourself. But if you'd done it in-house, that might have been a rather risky strategy.
And what you might want to do, thinking about what you're saying about regulatory affairs, is maybe get in one person, but one person is unlikely to know how to do everything and be a publisher and make the submissions, etc. So you get one person in who has an idea of what to do, but then you get the support from outside for the peaks and the big jobs, because you don't want a group of people sat around doing nothing when there isn't any work to do. So clearly that would
Very
be
definitely.
yes. Okay, Neil, the question for you was, how do you assess the viability or risk of any of the three options of buy, borrow, or grow your own?
Okay, this feels like quite a big question,
Yeah.
I would say. I'd maybe start by coming back to the money. I think that was because everything flows from there. Our journey has been one of kind of gradual ramping up over time. We've been operating around 7 years or so. We had some seed rounds, and the company grew to around 10 people. Then we did a £11 million Series A, grew the team to around 20 or so. We closed a 30 million round a couple of years ago, and we're now operating at 50 people. So we have grown our internal operation. So obviously, once you get more money and the money's in, you can have more ambition, sign contracts for space, hire lots of people. But I would say more than just cash in your bank, I would say the investor syndicate that you have and their ambition and their support and the scale of the ambition for the company can be really critical in helping you make these decisions around what's viable and what's not. If you have that strong support, you can actually think ahead of your cash horizon and maybe make hires that you would otherwise not make if you were being incredibly cautious. And we have certainly done that on our journey. We've certainly made strategic hires before we had the money in the bank. I certainly came when the company had a few months left, but that support and that vision from the backers, I think, can't be underestimated. And I know it's incredibly hard right now in terms of the funding environment, and it's probably harder to make those harder decisions, but nevertheless, I think that is important as you grow the company. Maybe coming on to, I guess, some more specifics around thinking about viability of outsourcing versus in-housing. For us, business critical functions are really, really important. So as I said, we've been developing a target ID platform. It's a very biology-intensive platform, unique capabilities, and we created this screening group that would be very, very hard to replicate in a CRO environment or even in other pharma companies. So for us, that's been the team that we have absolutely in-housed. So it's completely cool, but all kinds of obviously peripheral functions, whether it's IP, IT, we kind of have a flexible outsourcing model for that kind of thing. And then as the company's grown, I mentioned earlier, we've built a drug discovery operation and engine. To go into the science a little bit, what we're working on, we work in collaboration with pharma partners, but internally we're focused within the targeted protein degradation space. We have used our platform to identify a whole series of ligases which can be utilised to degrade therapeutic targets, a very exciting area. And our mission is now to drug the ligases that we've identified on the platform. And that represents quite an exciting opportunity. So not only do we have a chemical platform, but we now have a biology platform, we now have a chemical platform, and we can replicate that over and over. So key viability decisions for us is, do we outsource our drug discovery, or do we grow an internal drug discovery team? And for us, that's where we've seen, I would say, economies of scale in setting up what is a bespoke drug discovery operation. The assay cascades that you need to put in place for degrader therapeutics are quite specialised. And given that we want to work on multiple ligases, being able to churn that engine over and over has been really, really productive for us, and we believe incredibly cost effective. So, those decisions in terms of whether to in-house or externalise, we've certainly chosen the areas of drug discovery, in vitro assay testing, protein production, biophys, computational chemistry to grow internally. There are certain areas where we believe it's incredibly cost effective to externalise, and I would highlight medchem being very, very clear. Unfortunately, and it kind of pains us and kills us, we offshore that as well. We do not do that in the UK. We could not afford to do it in the UK, but it has actually worked tremendously effectively for us in terms of making compounds, bringing them back, testing them in-house, and we have a cycle that is now very efficient. So maybe just a couple more areas in terms of thinking about viability. Obviously, you have the cash in the bank. You've chosen the areas that you want to internalise, but then can you internalise it? And I think that perhaps over the last couple of years, that's been quite challenging for many of us. Pointing to a couple of areas, availability of talent. We can't take for granted that you can literally just bring all the expertise in one house at the drop of a hat. We're located in Cambridge, south of Cambridge, and it has been a terrific area to locate, but there are certain skills that have been hard to attract, and that's where I think in our pre-discussion we spoke about the effects of COVID and the way in which maybe it's changed our mindsets to hire people that are not necessarily located in the area that we operate, where perhaps maybe we were a bit blinkered and just thinking in that Cambridge mindset. And not underestimating the challenge of securing the right space as well. And often in these panels, people talk about the lack of availability of space. It's always an issue. There's will be all kinds of headlines to say, yes, there's no space in Cambridge and Oxford. And, my sense is that that's changing, but I think probably a big, big challenge is flexibility of space. I think there's probably lots of options if you want to secure a big amount of space in 1 year's time, and you're willing to spend £1 million fitting it out on a very long lease. I think that's easy. What's really hard is if you want to have incremental bits of space on a short-term basis that's fitted out as a lab that can really enable you to kind of mould your organisation. That's hard. That's very hard right now, and I think that, to me, that's, if I was a property developer, if there's anyone in the room, I would make that offering, because I think there'll be a lot of demand for smaller companies that do want to flex and respond, rather than the big developers just saying, here's a towel block, I'm going to get people to pay for these mega fit outs. And anyway, that's probably enough for me talking for a minute.
Did anybody else want to come in on that?
I think the talent bit's an interesting one. Sandra mentioned culture a couple of times. I think that's really important, both from a management of outsourced capability, but also scale of the company. If the culture is the right culture, then it's much easier to scale because everyone's heading in the right direction. Yeah. I think if the availability of talent is such that you have to access it from different corners of the region, country, world, which is increasingly the case because there's more flexibility post-COVID, which is a good thing. Then I think, as leaders of these organisations, we have to think extra hard about fostering that right culture, because, a lot of the creativity and culture comes from, close proximity and working together, and those spaces in the day that aren't structured, where you don't all sit around the table and have to focus on a specific objective. And I think, these kind of decisions become a little bit more complicated when you have that kind of distance between the talent if you can't access it locally.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. I think that kind of brings me to your question, Dan, which was, if the key to success is building the best possible talent into an effective team culture, does it actually matter whether the people are your own employees, or is it a vital element to build trust and cohesion such that it is one team? And how do you do that?
Yeah, so I think, we talked about culture a few times, right? And I think first and foremost, joke there, I'm sure there is now. I think you've got to be driven by what your business needs, right? The business decision in terms of what is best for the business to progress that business is crucial. But I do think that having that culture of people is tremendously important. And I think in terms of, the simple question of can you, is it more important to build one in-house or can you have it external? I think there are a few things to bear in mind. I think what we found so number one, culture internally is important. You've got to be able to manage that in a post-COVID world, and that is not necessarily an easy thing to do. I think picking up on what Rob just said then, right? You can access talent from geographically quite far. I do think that what we found, certainly both as an organisation, but with in terms of our portfolio, is that you can get access to different members of talent, different talent pools across different regions. Actually bringing them together to work as a cohesive unit, which used to happen over coffee, over lunch in an office environment, is becoming increasingly more difficult. It's not impossible, but it's become a genuine organisational challenge because they've different people, different priorities, families, no families, certain stages of their career, whatever it may be. Bringing everyone in to have discussions, where you can whiteboard sessions or you can go through things, it has become harder. And I think organisations really have to work quite carefully on that culture generally, because you lose a lot of value. And what you end up finding if you don't manage that properly is you've got a lot of people who may want to work for the business, but they're not part of the business. It feels like everyone's just a consultant working for an organisation. And yes, will you get an output? Yes, you will. Will that output be as good or as effective as it would otherwise be if you'd managed that properly? I can argue probably not. And the question then is can you do that with an external team? Well, I guess that rather depends on what the culture you're setting, because if you've just got it, if you're not going to manage that culture, you're not going to take it seriously, you're not going to put the time into the people who are going to work for you. Do you gain or lose anything by outsourcing? Well, if you're going to manage an external body of people they're going to work with for a long time, probably not. But I think when you've got to a point of critical mass, and you are in a process of growing a business, I do think building that culture of people that all feel like they're working towards a common goal is perhaps easier if you can manage that in-house. And I think it does lead to more successful businesses. Because everyone's human, everyone's a person. You have to manage people. People are your greatest asset. They can also, in many ways, unfortunately, be one of the greatest liabilities if they're not, if that culture, if that organisational shift, if that focus isn't managed properly. So can outsourcing be an effective part of that? Yes, I do believe it can. It has to be, particularly for some businesses, depending on what your business is. In my experience, having been involved in businesses in the past or managing the portfolio now, are the businesses that function better than others the ones who are managing that culture better and managing that organic growth better? Yeah, they probably are. And the only other thing I would add, and we mentioned this, I think Fran mentioned this at the start, we talked about M&A and M&A being an important part. And I can't flag how many times I've seen people screw up the people part of M&A in the past. They buy businesses, they think, right, I want a capability. I'm going to bring that capability in-house. It's going to be great because I don't have it, and I'm going to buy a load of people, and we've got great business alignment on the numbers. Ain't that great? And then you bring two people together, and people, the bit that people always screw up, always screw up, is post-merger integration. How you make two organisations have got two different cultures work together. You just think, oh, I've got one team, it's going to fit in like a glove, and it doesn't. Almost always people leave. You see hemorrhaging of teams because they don't manage the culture and that integration properly. They focus all on the business aspects, and people neglect the culture and the people piece. And then the business you bought that you thought was worth X, that's going to do Y, suddenly you can't get the talent because you're in shortage of talent. It's not right to outsource it. People leave and they go somewhere else, and that business you bought or you've merged with, the value of it decreases, and what you wanted to get out from that doesn't work. And I think 40% of mergers, acquisitions, I guess, in the UK fail for that reason, I think.
Okay. So maybe our last question, and I'll go across to all of you for this. So growing is fundamentally about change management. So is part of mitigating the growing pains of a life science company for the founders and their early investors to spot, recruit and nurture potential future leaders who are equipped to lead through change? Do you want to go first, Brian?
Yes, I can do that. So I think the answer is yes, you've got to have people that are able to work and adapt within an environment. And one of the things I quite often say is that people that found companies, and I include myself in that, are not often the people that can run them in the middle parts or the growing or the latter parts. And I think that recognising horses for courses is something that is quite critical in terms of successfully growing and also having the acceptance within the team that founders may not necessarily have all the skills that are needed as you grow and adapt, and having the bigness of mind, I suppose, to be able to say, well, I've done my job on that now. Now I move aside, and it doesn't always happen, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with everything Fran just said. I guess to add that yes, there are growing pains, but I guess there's probably multiple rounds of growing pains as companies go through various stages of evolution, whether it's the Series A, very small team, up to larger sizes. We're at a critical mass of 50 people now, which feels like quite a nice number. We just about know everyone. But absolutely, in terms of the senior team, people do need to recognise when they need to move on, bring new people in, new expertise. But through it all, try and maintain some kind of positive company culture. And I guess maybe to add to the things that were said earlier, yes, it's in terms of outsourcing, internalising, it's all very well having an internal capability, but if you have a super high turnover in an organisation, there's no point. So developing that really strong culture where everyone actually feels really bought in and has skin in the game, making sure every employee has share options in an organisation, I think is a really nice way of incentivising everyone from the top to the very bottom, you know. And for us, that has meant that, you know, we've had some exceptional amount of dedication from our staff who you know, will pull out all the stops to make things happen. So you know, that's been super positive.
I mean, in many ways, it's an irresistible hypothesis, isn't it? Of course, you should look for talent, you know, because that's the future of the business, and legacies are really important. I think what's an interesting subject to ponder is the suitability of smaller businesses that are agile and flexible as a training ground for leadership, because they can be quite stressful situations. And you know, if you're growing up with a company that is adapting constantly and is quite a stressful environment, is that the best environment to create a foundation of leadership? I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it isn't. It's an interesting one. I think, you know, some of us are a generation where we learned to lead in big pharma, which was very stable, and you got a foundation of good leadership training that you could convert into smaller, more agile teams. That's kind of, we're losing that a little bit in the UK, right? I think the necessity to train in smaller businesses is to learn to lead in smaller businesses is more upon us, because there's more of us leading smaller businesses. But I think as leaders of smaller businesses, we need to be cognizant that we create an environment that's nurturing for future leaders, and we don't scare the pants off them by being just too kind of yeah. It's about culture, right? It's about culture.
Alexander.
Yeah, so totally agree with all the points made, and I guess it's that whole point about bringing the talent that is capable of doing the job, but also recognizing that they've got room for growth, but also contribute to the larger team. So not all the same team, but actually being able to challenge each other and helping grow the team. And then the other thing is that Rob alluded to is the fact that we need to grow people. So recognize not everybody will have to stay the whole journey. Recognizing that people have done a great job and might want to move on to something else, because we need to always train new people to set up those new companies that we didn't think about, and therefore actually having that talent across the UK rather than thinking of our own team in that respect, to say actually time has passed, we're moving on, and other people might set up something new, which is really exciting.
That's a really good point. Yeah, Dan.
Yeah, I think it's, I think nurturing talent is crucial, because if you've got people in a business, they know a lot about that business. I think it's incumbent on leaders to try and to put in place a culture where people do feel that there is a path for them, that they can progress. I think that is inherently important, as is balancing lateral hires, right? I mean, there's a strategy, and it's picking up on what everyone said, but I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I think you can run the two together. But I think the important bit in all of this is, I see a lot of people are guilty of not communicating properly. And what I mean by that is that, we've found founders of businesses who, they don't really want to run the business long term, or they don't even want to run it immediately, but they feel they need to run it because it's their technology. That and you actually talk to them, you get down to the nitty gritty, you have a conversation. Look, what is it that you actually want to do? Do you want to run the science? Do you want to lead people? They're different skills, and actually having an honest conversation and working out where people fit there. It doesn't happen enough. It probably should happen more. And you can build more effective businesses by doing that. And that applies not just for the people who start the businesses and what they want, because actually, again, sometimes we have conversations with founders that we invest in, and like, thank God you've said that. I don't have to lead this. I thought I'd just have to. And you think, no, we can actually just recruit. We can recruit. Let's work on this together. Let's work on a strategy. So just simple conversations like that, but also speaking to people who you bring into businesses or you grow. Like, again, I don't think people talk about that enough. They either make an assumption, people through the way people act or work, and we could do a lot more in having conversations, I think, there, which will then dictate to a degree how you grow that talent internally, where your focuses are, what you can put in place for certain people. Some people may not want it. You've got people who are very effective at their job and really love it, and they're brilliant and they're crucial to the business, but they've no desire, for various reasons, family, personal, otherwise, to either lead or to move, to move in a certain direction that you may want to move them to. So I think communication is the kind of bit that I'd take out of that as being crucial and probably underplayed.
Thank you. Any last comments?
A lot of it comes down to personality type, I think, doesn't it? So for founders, I think notoriously are ideas people, creators. Yeah. But as businesses evolve, we need executors, and that's a completely different skill set. Yeah. So that that's a natural evolution. No idea I am in that.
I think there's also the side of how you manage people who want to move in a certain direction, and for various reasons they're not right. There's the other side of that as well.
Yeah. I think we should move on from this.
So Dan, Alexander, Rob, Neil and Fran, I'd like to thank you so much for this really great panel. Thank you.